All right, today we're jumping back in time to 2025. It was a year that kicked off with military action and wrapped up with a total reset of the Indian market. Seriously, it was a roller coaster that tested every investor, challenged policymakers, and in the end, basically rewrote the rules of the game. So, let's break down how it all went down.
You know, 2025 was really a year of two extremes. It started with conflict, then pivoted into some pretty bold reforms, and ended with a market that looked completely different. This wasn't just another year on the calendar for India. This was a year that truly defined the decade.
So you can really split the year into two totally different halves. The first half, well, that was all about crisis. It was like a perfect storm of geopolitical shocks and some nasty economic headwinds all hitting at the same time, shaking the market right to its core.
So how did this whole thing kick off? Well, it all started on May 7th with something called Operation Sindoor. It was a military action that just completely shocked the system, and suddenly geopolitical risk was the only thing anyone could talk about. And just as you'd expect, through May and June, investors got spooked. They pulled their money out and the markets went wild. By the middle of the year, all that political uncertainty was just getting worse because the economy was starting to show some serious cracks.
And man, these economic problems were coming from every direction. You had foreign investors just dumping stocks and pulling their money out. Back home, companies weren't making as much money as everyone hoped. And on top of all that, global trade tensions were flaring up, which meant less foreign money was coming into the country. It was, quite literally, a perfect storm of bad news.
But then, right when things looked about as bad as they could get, the entire story just flipped. The second half of 2025 was all about reform. The policymakers decided to step in and take some really decisive action to tackle the crisis head-on.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? With the markets in a panic and the economy slowing down, what exactly did the policymakers do? How did they manage to turn this whole ship around?
The big turning point came on August 15th, India's Independence Day. In a really historic speech, the government announced a massive policy shift. It was a signal that they were taking the economy in a completely new direction.
And what was this big shift? They called it GST 2.0. Now, this wasn't just some small adjustment. Oh no, this was a radical new tax system. The goal was pretty simple. First, get people spending money again. Second, make it way easier for businesses to follow the rules. And third, just clear out all the complicated stuff that was slowing down growth.
And the difference was just night and day. The old GST system was, well, it was a mess. A tangled web of different tax rates that created a ton of confusion. GST 2.0 just cut right through all of that with a super simple two-rate structure. The whole philosophy changed from complicated to crystal clear.
But you know what's really wild? How fast they did it. It was announced on August 15th, got approved by the GST Council on September 3rd, and was actually up and running by September 22nd. I mean, for a government to make such a huge economic change in just over a month, that's just unheard of. At its heart, the reform was all about this incredible simplification. They took all those confusing tax rates and just collapsed them into two. A 5% rate for the essentials and an 18% rate for pretty much everything else. All of that old complexity was just swept away.
And maybe the biggest deal of all was this little number, 0%. They made health and life insurance completely tax-free. Think about that. For the average Indian family, this was immediate financial relief and a massive, massive boost to their long-term financial security.
Now you got to remember, the government wasn't doing this all on its own. While they were pushing through this huge tax reform, the Reserve Bank of India, the country's central bank, was right there alongside them, making its own moves to keep the financial system stable.
So what did the RBI do? They started cutting interest rates. A lot. Through 4 separate cuts over the year, they brought the main lending rate, the repo rate, all the way down from 6.5% to 5.25%. And that's a big deal, because it made borrowing money cheaper for absolutely everyone, which helped ease the pressure across the entire economy.
So after this absolute roller coaster of a year, what's the big lesson here for investors? I mean, what did 2025 really teach us about how markets and the stories we tell about them actually work?
This one quote pretty much nails it. Policy evolved, markets rotated, price decided. It's the perfect sequence. First, the government changes the rules. Then the money starts moving in response. But at the end of the day, the only thing that tells you the real truth is the price.
And boy, did the market react. That whole consumption story that everyone thought was dead and buried, it came roaring back to life. Money started pouring back into the banks as their financial health improved. And most importantly, the whole story changed. Almost overnight, we went from talking about a crisis to talking about a recovery.
So if there's one core principle to take away from 2025, it's this: discipline always wins over narratives. When the crisis hit, all those hot themes everyone was chasing just fell apart, and a lot of people got burned. The real lesson here is that you shouldn't chase the story of the day. Stick to your plan, because the real money is usually made where the crowd isn't.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The stories we tell about the market are always changing. The thing that seems like a sure bet today can look like a terrible idea tomorrow. So when that narrative inevitably changes, what do you trust? The lesson of 2025 is pretty clear. The only things you can really count on are your own discipline and what the price is telling you.